Talk 4. An introduction to the principle of restoration in a marital setting. In the first chapter of the Bible, we read the story of the fall of man. Humans were created to be noble children of God. However, we lost our way and started to exhibit behaviors and thought patterns that caused evil and disharmony to come into our families and communities. The divine principle labels these behaviors as fallen natures. In this presentation, we seek to briefly explore some of the ways that fallen natures affect our marital relationships. We will be looking at fallen natures from a psychological perspective. As we offer only a basic understanding of some psychological processes, this is not to be taken as a professional presentation, which, by default, needs to be far more comprehensive. The introduction to the divine principles starts by telling us that we all have a healthy part of ourselves, our original mind, which grows through the principles of co-creation. It also informs us that we have fallen natures. Fallen natures are behaviors and thoughts that God does not embody. These natures cause us to be distant from God and make it hard for us to manifest goodness in our lives. The principle explains that it is possible for humans to stop displaying fallen natures, and this is done through using the principle of restoration. Instead of fallen natures, psychologists might use the terms trauma-based survival or coping strategies. They are called survival strategies because we always need strategies to deal with everything that happens in our life, and if we can't use a healthy strategy, then we use an unhealthy one. The divine principle explains that we can develop fallen natures or survival strategies in 3 ways. First, we might inherit them through the norms of a traumatized culture. For example, poorly formed legislation can cause various groups of citizens to experience harm or undermine social dynamics. Alternatively, the negative energy of previous traumatizing events, like wars and famines, can stay within a nation for many generations. For example, the First and Second World Wars created an immense amount of trauma, and some of this trauma is still being passed on down through many European families today. Some of this trauma you might know about because it was inflicted on you through words or behaviors. However, some of the trauma you experienced you don't know anything about because it occurred in unspoken ways, like a plant not getting the nourishment it needs. Second, we inherit various survival strategies that have been passed on down our family tree or through contact with other traumatized people we might have connected with. In our family setting, we all have parents who have some survival strategies. Third, we can gain them through personal experiences, through our own personal sins. Hence, in young adulthood, we might feel unloved, harmed by a couple of specific events, or neglected. These inner emotions can then lead to relational difficulties in our marriage. Our original mind desires to be offered love, safety, and respect. Of course, the world is not always a respectful, loving, or safe place. Traumatized people are all around us, and harmful experiences occur. When our original mind lives in such a complex environment, powerful emotions such as fear, shame, guilt, or pain can be generated. As we have seen from the previous talks, ideally, we are mature enough to regulate our responses to these challenging experiences, and we do so using the principles of co-creation and the 5 textures of God's love. For example, we learn from what went wrong, or forgive those who hurt us, or go through the processes that are necessary for us to forgive ourselves. This processing allows us to mature. However, sometimes we are unable to process these emotions in a healthy way. Here we are experiencing anger, pain, fear, shame, or guilt, and we don't have the skills to process them. We become overwhelmed with emotions that we presently don't know how to deal with, so these emotions often stay with us. We store these emotions in our subconscious. Then, in adulthood, whenever we meet a problem in our present lives that has similarities to these unresolved difficult moments from our past, these powerful emotions are triggered. They rise up, take control of us, and make a healthier response almost impossible. These painful emotions blow away our natural ability to function as God's children. Hence, these buried emotions cause problems in our marriage until we are desperate enough to examine them, or we have an experience that allows for God's love to pour in and heal them. Because we could not process these past traumatic events using healthy processes, we might store powerful emotions in our subconscious. And these powerful emotions keep control over parts of our lives. This leads to several outcomes. First, the part of us that experienced trauma is trapped in time. For many of us, we can remember the moments where we were harmed or harmed others as if they happened yesterday. Second, the part of ourselves that got damaged during that traumatic moment cannot resume its healthy path of growth until the traumatic moment has been explored and healed. Third, because we cannot develop the damaged part of ourselves so it matures and flourishes, we are forced to develop survival strategies as a means to deal with life. For some of us, using a dysfunctional strategy can seem to be safer than healing something in our inner world. Truth can be dangerous sometimes. Going back to look at any traumatic moment is scary. We couldn't deal with those emotions then, and they still look scary to us now. So we keep using our survival strategies, even if they are not very effective or even hurtful. For example, a man, when he was a boy, made a mistake and sought to be honest with his father. However, instead of treating his son with compassion and valuing his son's honesty, he treated his son harshly. As a result, the boy grows up and finds it incredibly hard to be honest with others when he makes a mistake. His relationship with his wife is affected. He's afraid of negative consequences if he shares honestly with her. His trauma of rejection affects their emotional intimacy. And when he makes mistakes with others, he finds it hard to say sorry, and he tends to run away. However, when he explores this moment with a counselor in later life, he can see that a part of his inner world has never matured. He determines to be more honest about his mistakes and finds, to his surprise, that his wife and others are far more forgiving than his father was. When interaction is harmonious, we speak or act from one of our textures of God's love to a specific texture within our partner. For example, my nurturing parent might speak to my partner's free child, "You look lovely in that dress." And if they respond back from one of their 5 textures, the dialogue flows respectfully and generates developmental energy. However, sometimes what we say, our tone of voice, or our actions trigger a trauma within our partner's subconscious. When this trauma is awakened, so are the emotions that are connected to this trauma, the pain, shame, guilt or fear. These emotions are so overwhelming that our partner might respond with one of their survival strategies. For example, they might become critical, fearful, or rebellious. Ideally, in order to not let things spiral out of control, the partner who now feels under attack can seek God's guidance as to how they might still act with nobility and respond from one of their healthy textures. This will be the starting point that allows their partner's nervous system to calm down. For many of us, we need God's guidance and a lot of practice if we are to find the healthiest responses. For example, a wife comes from a family where the father had an affair, and her parents almost divorced. Then, in her own marriage, she notices that her husband is consistently coming home late from work. His actions trigger her subconscious fear that her husband might be having an affair. Then, one day, as soon as he walks in the door, her fearful emotions push her to start an argument with him. Hopefully, he might be able to sit her down, listen to her concerns, and agree that, from now on, he will inform her when he is going to be late and give her a good reason why. However, sometimes, we are so overwhelmed by our partner's emotional response that this triggers our own survival strategies, and disharmony is the outcome. For example, the wife's fear might trigger his own survival strategy and, after an intense argument, he goes down the pub and gets drunk. None of this deals with the underlying issues. Without understanding the root causes, these arguments happen many times over the following years. Ideally, couples take time to learn about each other's lives. If possible, they especially need to seek out moments in their partner's childhood when they experienced hardship, fear, pain, shame, or guilt. When partners understand each other more deeply, they are more able to have compassion for each other. This can help them learn to be more authentic and constructive when offering their own responses to their partner's survival strategies. Our survival strategies might only affect one part of our life, for example, just in our family relationships, or our career, or our health. For example, a woman who was sexually abused as a child may grow up to become a valued employee. However, When she tries to become intimate with her partner, powerful stored emotions are triggered and overwhelm her, making it hard to feel close and loved. Alternatively, these strategies might form part of our whole personality. For example, children raised by alcoholic parents might lack self-esteem and develop a whole range of survival strategies that cause them to be emotionally distant from their spouse or others. Also, since their parents used alcohol as a means to deal with life's difficulties, they are also more likely to do the same. It's good to look at some of our different survival strategies. For example, since my original mind was treated badly and harmed, when I grow up I might struggle to uphold core values that allow me to respect myself and others. For example, I might find it easier to steal, lie, take drugs, or watch pornography. Alternatively, since my traumatized self is more likely to see the world as hostile or unsafe, then it is more likely that I will not wish to enter into the love and beauty dynamic, to enter into life. Instead, I hold myself back and take on the role of a victim. For example, I might not try hard at school, or I might prefer to live on unemployment benefits rather than build a successful career. On this traumatized foundation, an individual is more likely to express fallen natures or survival strategies. In this short, simplistic analysis, we might talk about 8 different types of survival strategies that may appear in a marriage. For example, one partner may be slightly rebellious and not want to be much of a team player. Alternatively, some of us express a lack of confidence and feel unworthy. Hence, we might harm ourselves physically, for example, by not taking care of our health. Or we might develop mental strategies, like self-criticism, that harm our ability to flourish. Then again, in certain instances, one partner might be overly compliant. They deny their own needs, refuse to share their opinions, and do whatever the other partner asks them to do just to get love and attention. This is not a fulfilling experience for either partner. Alternatively, in some marriages, one partner refuses to develop some simple, everyday competencies that are needed for life. They stay immature and expect their partner to do many things for them. Moreover, some partners have cut themselves off from many of their emotions and thus find it hard to build emotional bonds with their marital partner. Another surviving strategy is to become a rescuer. Some spouses, instead of letting their partner grow and develop, keep stepping in to do things that their partner should be doing for themselves. The rescuer then gets upset that their efforts are not appreciated, or, over time, they get increasingly frustrated that their partner still acts immaturely. Next, rather than develop the skills of a nurturing parent so as to raise up our partner, some of us just become endlessly critical of the weaknesses of our spouse. And lastly, rather than respecting their spouse, their freedom to choose, to make mistakes, or to have their own opinions, some of us seek to control all aspects of the relationship, what our partner buys, where the couple will go on holiday, what they watch on TV, and much more. All of these survival strategies can cause negative moments within the marital setting. They are all unhealthy substitutes for the healthier 5 textures of God's love. Moreover, when expressed in intimate relationships, our survival strategies undermine our ability to live in the dynamic of love and beauty. We might offer our survival strategies, which sometimes don't bring about any kind of beauty, success, or closeness. Additionally, we tend to attract the level of beauty that we feel worthy of receiving. If we don't feel worthy, if our survival strategies separate us from God's love, then we tend to accept lower standards of beauty. For example, in a marriage, one partner might feel content to live in a messy house or primarily eat junk food. Alternatively, the daughter of an alcoholic might find she is more likely to be drawn towards men who have a drinking problem. Also, when things go wrong, and we respond with trauma-based behaviors or thoughts, a response we find almost impossible to control or change, the only hope is that our partner changes. We blame our spouse and hope that they will stop doing the things that trigger our trauma. It's hard to think that I am the one who needs to become aware of my traumas and heal them, that I am responsible to overcome my fallen natures. Only I can do this. And yet again, if I haven't been able to forgive those who previously hurt me, I am more likely not to develop those skills that will allow me to forgive the mistakes of my spouse. The divine principle explains what happens when fallen natures enter our lives. First, we struggle to see ourselves from God's viewpoint. Rather than seeing ourselves as a child of God, a person who is always loved by God, we might have a lower appreciation of ourselves and others. Next, this low viewpoint of ourselves causes us to leave our proper position. Rather than expressing and growing the 5 textures of God's love so we can be empowered to develop and achieve our life goals, we express some of the 8 types of survival strategies, all of which limit our potential. Third, we find that we don't have the internal processes that will one day allow us to mature ourselves and naturally achieve mastery and fruitfulness. But, in our marriage, we wish to bring about change, so we might claim our authority by using force. The principle labels this the reversal of dominion. Hence, we might use our rescuing, overcritical, and over-controlling parent as a means to force our marriage or partner into the shape we wish them to be. Lastly, we multiply our fallen natures. By refusing to heal and mature using natural principles, we might pass our survival strategies onto our children or create new ones. The question we may ask ourselves is how God has encouraged humans throughout history to heal their fallen natures. The divine principle shares that God has encouraged His children to use the principles of restoration so they are freer to live in love and beauty. Hence, the principle offers clear advice for those who are serious about removing their fallen natures. First, the principles of restoration inform us that, if we want to heal ourselves, we need to place ourselves in a relationship with an able, who, in a family setting, is our spouse or children. In these relationships, we seek to notice what triggers our survival strategies and our different traumatized responses. We realize that, in the same situation, many others don't express these survival strategies and that we could do better. We then spend time to understand the hidden trauma and its associated trapped emotions. Hopefully, we can release some of these trapped emotions through tears or other means. In doing so, we usually find it easier to regulate our triggered responses. Next, we move on to knowingly integrate our traumatized parts into the mental picture we have of ourselves. This trauma is part of wonderful me, and the whole of me is still worthy of God's love. Lastly, since we are now more aware of this trauma, when it is triggered once again by a new event, we are not overwhelmed by an uncontrolled emotional response. Instead, we can step back, watch our survival strategies seeking to manifest themselves, and refuse to implement them. We realize that our unhelpful survival strategies will not work. Thus, we have time to seek out and implement healthier, more effective responses. Since we all have some survival strategies, partners in every long-term marriage must learn to digest their partner's survival strategies. The goal is to learn to regulate your responses so that they remain within the realm of the principle. This is a complex task. However, this is what God has to do every day as He interacts with His broken children. Hence, being able to process your partner's survival strategies will bring you closer to God and your divine potential. All this will help you raise resilient children. The Bible offers us the story of the prophet Job. Job was dragged through many traumatic events. But he realized he needed to process these difficulties in a way that would allow him not to get angry or resentful. When he could do this, God could bless him even more. Hence, going this pathway is a noble task. What we find is that when one partner can accept and love the totality of the other partner, both their healthy parts and their survival strategies, this has a powerful effect on the other partner. This partner now has a higher chance of integrating their survival strategies into their whole persona through a natural process. They can end up saying, even with this brokenness, my partner loves me. I am lovable. Such thoughts allow for some reprogramming of the subconscious, which allows them to leave behind some of their survival strategies and move on to new paths of growth. The principle asks unificationists to digest the brokenness of the world with love, for this is the only way to eventually build a world of peace and cooperation. And in our marriages, we heal the world and our family trees one person at a time. There is no other way. One last piece of advice. Since we all have fallen natures, a young adult, or anyone building a family, would find the rest of their life to be more fulfilling if they sought to heal themselves before they started a family. For a period of time, they could choose someone to be their able, and ask God to use this relationship to start the process of restoration. Hopefully, moments would arise where the person seeking to heal would see themselves being triggered. They could note down the triggering event, notice what emotions were revealed, and see their survival strategy. They might then reflect on their own life and where they might have experienced these emotions before. Armed with this knowledge, they would be wise to visit a therapist and start on the pathway to healing and wholesomeness. In a mentoring manual, one would not seek to help the partners go through all levels of the principles of restoration so as to deal with their survival strategies. Trained counselors are needed to do this. However, Level 3 discussion sheets would be provided. These worksheets aim to help the partners understand the roots of each other's survival strategies, thus allowing for greater empathy and resilience. One last point of note. Survival strategies are not the only reason God's goodness might not be present. For example, humans can worship false idols that seduce them into believing that what they are receiving is better than the love of God. For example, watching pornography, chasing after money at all costs, getting caught up in false ideologies like God-denying Marxism, and more, all create massive problems for human communities. Also, individuals can purposely, from their own free will, harm others, even when they know they can do better. We hope the above provides you with a clear overview of the various God-given principles that you might use to help you build a flourishing marital family. We hope that, when you see how practical the principle is, you might hold the principle in even higher regard. It is to be noted that this model not only applies to fruitful individuals who wish to build a successful family. The principle explains that the inner workings of a fruitful human create a blueprint that also describes the inner workings of a successful organization, company, or nation. These same principles can be used to analyze and improve any system you wish to improve. We wish you well.